I hope you got my email this time, most of you. I know there's one, Alex Allen, Sandy Allen. I think we left an L out of yours, but we're getting closer. But I started this a couple of years ago. I combined, I got to give that to Bob Wenzel. I combined the little foam beetle, which by itself is a fun little tie. It's just pretty simple, with the foam ant. I think the beetle is what, 6 or 7 in the book, and the foam ant is 28. I outlined that in the email. I already forgot what I said. But I like this. It makes a cool little fly. It's a dry fly. It works for brim. It works for trout. When terrestrial's out, it's more effective for trout. But if you would let me tie one, I will tell you now that if you don't do the sequence of steps that I'm using, you're going to have a problem. And I've changed the sequence. That's why I have a new handout. So let me tie one, and then I'll tie another one, and we'll go step by step again like we have in the past. First thing we got to do is lay a thread base. Now on this one, I'm going to start clear up by the eye, and I'm just going to lay a thread base all the way back to the bend. And I'm going to get rid of my tag end. Okay. Now you should have a black strip of foam. I'll show you how we prepare that strip of foam. I hope I can get this on the video.
Zoom back a little bit.
Back a little bit. Okay. See this piece of foam? I'm going to cut a sharp point on that with my scissors. It didn't cut very well, but it'll work. And one of these will probably do 3 or 4 flies. So I'm going to set that little point that I cut, and I'm going to try to catch the very end of that and pull it tight and make sure I've got it attached very well, okay? The next step is to get some peacock herl, because this has a pretty peacock herl bottom part of the body. And I'm going to get several strands. I don't know how many I grabbed. I've got 4 or 5. I'm going to kind of line the ends so that I have all the waste pretty much at one end. I see all that waste I've got. I'm going to get rid of all that waste. And I'm going to lay that peacock herl just behind the eye, do some easy wraps. I'm going to just tie that on around the hook shaft. And as I get back toward the bend, I'm going to try and make sure that herl is facing me. It's on this side of the hook. Okay? And we're going to rope this like we did before. It will make it much sturdier. So I'm going to do some roping. May have to do a couple different sessions of roping to get it a little bit more manageable. I don't like to work with too much of that. And I'm going to start wrapping that. I'll make sure I've got it back there. And I'm going to double up if I have to, because I want a nice thick base. I've run out of my roping, so I'm going to have to start roping again. The bottom part of this is what you ought to be concentrating on, how it looks, because the top part's going to get covered up. So I want that a little bit fuller. I'm going to go back, make that a little bit fuller. I'm gradually moving forward. I'm about out of my rope again. And I'm going to rope that. I'm going to need all the peacock herl I can get, because this is really thin stuff. I don't want to get too close to the eye. You've heard that before. Okay, so, and I have just, man, I have used up more HERL than I thought I was going to. I'm leaving a little bit of behind the eye, and I'm going to trim that peacock HERL off, get it out of my way. Now, last year when we tied this, we only went about halfway up the hook. Then we bent the top over and tied it off, and then we wrapped the HERL to the front. That, it's hard to tell if you're halfway that way. So I have gone all the way, and I'm going to make some wide wraps because I don't want to crush down my HERL that much, and I'm going to go back to about the midpoint. Okay? Then I'm going to take my foam, make sure it's on the top, and I'm going to make a nice easy loop, and then I'm going to tighten that up. And I may be a little bit too far back. I think I'm going to bring that just slightly forward. Because the back part of an ant is bigger than the front part. The abdomen is bigger than the... Now I've already got my peacock HERL there, so I'm going to make a couple of wide wraps up front, bring my foam back over, and I'm going to make sure I've got it snugged in good. And that's looking pretty good. So I'm going to cut that off as close to the tie-in as I can. If you cut it right, you'll still have ready access to the eye of the hook, and that's something that we would prefer to have, especially if you're trying to tie this onto a tippet. Now I'm going to tie that off, and then I'm going to trim my thread. And the reason this is a little bit more complicated is you can tell there are a few more steps here. So I'm going to go back to the midpoint, and I'm going to attach my thread. I want those wraps right on top of the other. I don't want a real wide gap there where I've tied in. So I'm going to make sure I've got that tied in really good. And then I'm going to trim my thread. And the next to last step is hackle. Okay? Now, this works for me sometimes, sometimes it doesn't. But if you notice, I've left quite a bit of tip from where I'm hoping to start wrap. I'm going to try to tie that off about halfway down that part that is horizontal to the shaft. And I'm going to lay it on the side, make sure I got it grabbed good. And then I'm going to put a whip finish on that because I don't want anything to come unraveled. Okay. And I'm going to grab my hackle plier. And it doesn't take a lot of wraps. But just a little bit. Oops. Shuckers. Man, I wrapped that thing tight. Okay, if that happens to you, all is not lost. You just start over again. Okay, I've got it tied in where I wanted it. I'm going to really cinch that sucker down good and tight now. I think I'll lift that and put a wrap behind it, just and hope that will attach. I've got a wider thread base than I wanted because I've had to tie that on a couple times. Okay. Now, what did I do with my hackle plier? There it is. Okay. We'll try one more time. Okay, I'm going to pull that around, and by having that extra tag, notice how this should kind of fold in vertically, 90 degree to the hook shank. It's not going to be perfect, but for this fly, it's not that critical because the top of the hackle is going to get mashed down anyway. Now I'm going to bring my thread around, try not to get any of that upright hackle caught in it, and get that to where I can trim this hackle. Try not to trim any of your vertical parts, just try to get just the stem, okay? And you can see I probably have enough for another fly with, that was a pretty long hackle. All right, last step. The color of foam is kind of immaterial. You just want something that's visible. Because on the water, this all black stuff, you kind of lose it on a float. So there are 2 or 3 different colors here. Whatever color turns you on, I'm going to lay this on. I got one end squarer than the other. And I don't want a whole lot of that. I just want to make sure I've grabbed enough that when I put a wrap through it, it's going to stand up. I'm going to cinch that in, maybe 3/16 of an inch, and then I'm going to tie that off with my whip finish tool. Now it's twisting on me, that's not a problem. At this stage, you can easily turn this whatever way you want, okay? Then I'm going to lift this up. I'm going to try and have it about the same size as the first one. Cut that off. And there is your combination beetle, ant.
What's cool?
It's a cool little fly.
Beetle, ant, huh?
Beetle, well, I don't know. Sometimes I call it a foam ant, sometimes I call it the foam beetle ant, but it's a combination of 2 patterns. On the foam beetle, you just have a little bit wider foam. You do the peacock HERL and tie it off, fold it over, tie it off, and you're done.